The HSPT is a high school placement test given to 8th graders who want to enroll in an independent or Catholic high school. The test is given just once that year, so many students start prepping for it as early as the 6th grade. The HSPT has 5 sections: verbal, quantitative, reading comprehension, mathematics, and language in that order. Each section is unique and requires different study skills and testing strategies. This video will go over suggestions for the HSPT Verbal section, which is the first section of the HSPT. Even though it's only 16 minutes long, this section contains 60 questions, and each of those fall into one of 5 specific types. In this tutorial, I will go over each of the 5 specific type of questions in the HSPT Verbal section so that you can recognize the question type and then know how to get to the right answer. The first type of question in the HSPT Verbal section tests a student's understanding of synonyms. The format would be the word and then followed by most nearly means. To study for the synonym questions in the HSPT, I suggest that students use flashcards for vocabulary mastery, and I will include a link below for my guide on how to use flashcards most efficiently. It would also be useful to study and learn prefixes, roots, and suffixes, especially if there is a word the student doesn't recognize. They can break that word into its parts and make a good prediction about what it likely means. When taking the HSPT, there are 2 strategies I suggest for how to answer these questions. First, before reading the answer choices, write a simple synonym for the term. For instance, this term, generate, if I was going to write a simple synonym for it, I might write make. Now I'm going to read the options and determine which is most similar to my idea. Looking through each of the choices, I see that create is the most similar to make. If you don't know the word at all, you can use your knowledge of prefixes, suffixes, and roots to help you still answer the question. That's what my second strategy reviews. You can underline the prefix, root, or suffix and write its meaning. I know that gen is the same prefix used in Genesis and generation, which means new or next. Now I'm going to look through my answer choices and see which best matches this. Looking through the choices, I see that create is the best one that correlates with my prediction of new and next. The second type of question is an antonym question, very similar to the synonym question. It will give you the word and then it will say means the opposite of. Just like with the synonym preparation, I suggest that you use flashcards for vocabulary mastery and learn prefixes, roots, and suffixes ahead of time. When actually taking the test, I have 2 strategies that are very similar to the synonym strategies with an added twist. Just like with the synonym strategies, before you read the answer choices, write a simple synonym for the term. Fortify, I know, means to strengthen. So I'm going to write that down. Now I'm going to read the answer choices and I'm going to cross off any that are most similar to my idea. Load could be strengthen. And then I'm going to choose the one that is the most opposite of my idea, weaken. So in this case, you're choosing the one that's the most different. If you don't know the word, you can use your knowledge of prefixes and suffixes, and you can underline what you do recognize. I see in this word fortify the prefix fort. I know that forts are used by military for protection from the enemy troops. So fortify could mean to protect. Now I'm going to cross off any options that best match this. I don't really see any that best match it. Maybe load. And I'm going to choose the one that is the most opposite. The opposite of protect would be to weaken. The third type of question is an analogy question. You will see it in the format of a word is to, a word as, a word is to. So to be more specific, look at this example. Tree is to trunk as flower is to, and then you have your answer choices. My suggestion for how to answer this question would be to write a simple sentence relating the first two words. For instance, I might say, a tree is held up by its trunk. That's my sentence that relates tree and trunk. Now, as the second step, I would apply this sentence to the third word in the question and then each of the answer choices to see which fits best, keeping the order of the wording the same. A flower is held up by its bee. No. A flower is held up by its stem. Yeah, that works, but I'm going to check the others to make sure. A flower is held up by its leaf. No. A flower is held up by its pollen. No, so clearly stem is my best choice. There are many different analogy connections that you will see on the HSPT. We just saw an example of a whole to part where the tree was the whole and the trunk was the part, just like flower was the whole and stem was the part. You could also see it in the reverse, part to whole. You can see an association, a characteristic, a purpose, synonyms, antonyms, cause to effect, effect to cause, sequence or degree. Feel free to pause the video at this point to jot down some examples of each of these type of analogy connections. But the general strategy of creating a sentence with the first two and applying that to the third and the answer choices will help. The fourth type of question on the HSPT verbal section is grouping. You will recognize this because it will ask you which word does not belong with the others, and then we'll give you 4 choices. The strategy I suggest would be to choose 2 words from the answer choices that are certainly linked together. Looking at my answer choices, I see speak and whisper. I know that those are both together because they're both ways of talking. Now that I've determined the relationship of those 2 words, I'm going to look at the remaining 2 options and decide which one is also a way of talking. That would be yell. Because those 3 fit together, sound is the one that does not. And specifically in this case, sound is more of the category, and speak, yell, and whisper are more of the types underneath that category. Just like with analogies, there are common relationships you'll see in the grouping, like we just saw items in the category. But you could also see synonyms, types, degrees, parts of speech, or functions. Again, feel free to pause the video at this point if you want to jot down some notes about the different types of relationships that can show up in the HSPT grouping type of questions. The last and final type of question on the HSPT verbal section is a ranking question. You can recognize this type of question because there is 3 sentences and the last sentence states, if the first 2 statements are true, the third is, and then you have the options of true, false, or uncertain. My suggested strategy for how to handle this type of question is to create a visual representation of the first 2 sentences using single letters to represent the items. So let's take a look at the first 2 sentences. Penelope, I'll write that as a P, has more cats than Uma. I'll do a greater than symbol, technically less than, but pointing at Penelope, and then I'll write U for Uma. But fewer cats than Michael. So Penelope has less than Michael. I like to keep them together in one visual representation if possible. That's the first sentence. Second sentence. Michael has fewer cats than Petra. I'm encountering a problem here because Petra, it starts with a P, and so does Penelope. So I'm going to call Petra PT and Penelope PN to help me distinguish between the 2. You may need to do that in the problem too. Now that I've created a visual representation of the first 2 sentences, put your pencil down and determine if the third sentence fits into your visual representation. Do not draw the third sentence. Penelope has more cats than Petra. Let's look. Does Penelope have more cats than Petra? No, Penelope is less than Petra, so this would be false because it contradicts my diagram. The trickiest part about this is that students often try to draw the third sentence in there, but it's asking you if the first two are true, the third is, and you're asking yourself about the third. There are many different types of ranking categories and ranking formats. What we just saw was a situation that was talking about more and less, and so I used greater than and less than symbols to arrange the items. But you could also have ranking formats that involve directions. Maybe the problem includes the words north, northeast, or before. I suggest you draw a map of the items in relation to each other. Actually put things before or north of or northeast of. Draw it out like a map. If the sentence includes words such as all, no, none, or some, I suggest you make a Venn diagram to represent their relationships, where the all would be in the middle, the some would be more on the outside, the none would be all the way on the outside. When it comes to the HSPT verbal section, the first step is always to identify what type of question you're looking at. Is it a synonym question, antonym, analogy, grouping, or ranking question? Once you've figured out which type of question it is, you now have a specific strategy for how to answer that question type, and you just go through the steps. This is obviously just one of the 5 sections of the HSPT. There are 4 others that are more assessing a student's general knowledge and don't have as many strategies to them and would require specific lessons to go over what the student already knows and what the student needs to still learn. If you're interested in having a tutor help you with this, feel free to contact us. I will give you all the contact information in the links below, and we will be happy to help.